Hi and welcome to Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem and today we are working with Year of the Snake collection. Let's head down to the board and take a closer look at the project we'll create together today. Today we're going to be revisiting the herringbone weave, but instead of going for multiple wraps around a bead, we're going to go for just two in either direction, just to show you that the herringbone weave can be very achievable and very simple to create effective looking jewellery. In terms of materials today, we're working with Year of the Snake once more, and I've chosen one of these beautiful scaled beads. This is a lovely solid metal bead to work with. We're also going to be needing some earring findings, and I've chosen three of these interlocking titanium looking beautiful beads. They interlock absolutely stunningly to create this gorgeous serpentine feature. In terms of wire, we're going to be working with 16 gauge, 20 gauge and 18 gauge today. Now these are quite firm wires, but it is very much easier to create that weave if you have a nice solid core wire. So I have around about a 3.5 inch length of that 16 gauge round wire. Mine is a copper, but because it's chilly today where I'm recording, it's a little bit stiff. I'm going to be using my memory wire finishing pliers to create a rounded form for the centre of a spiral. You can use your bail making pliers or you can use standard round pliers. We create almost a circular form, so around about 80% of a circular form, and then we'll start to push that wire into the non-dominant hand until we have 2 rotations of wire from the start point. So we've gone around once and then a second time. At the place where the wire finishes that second rotation, we're just going to pull that away to create almost a lollipop looking feature, and this is going to act as a stopper to keep our bead and our weave from sliding off the bottom of this segment of the earring. Let's just make sure that's nice and straight. Now these beads have beautiful large centres to them and they fit on the 16 gauge wire without any complaint whatsoever. We're now going to be using around about 6 inches or so of 20 gauge wire. This is a standard round wire. It's a medium temper, but I'm working with raw copper, so you could use a soft to medium craft wire or whatever you have available. We're going to start by wrapping around the core of this little lollipop feature, and what I want to have is the cut end rotating around the core wire but moving towards the bead, so you can hold it however it works best for you. I'm going to put around about 1/2 inch of that 20 gauge wire over the top and just fold it around to begin with, and you can see that the cut tail is closer to the bead than it is to the spiral on the end. Now we're working with wires that one wouldn't normally wrap with quite as much as we're going to do today. The reason for that is that it makes the jewellery last a lovely long time, so you may like to grab a pair of pliers. I'm using some bent chain nose pliers just to help you draw that tail all the way around. So let's push that over the top until we have 2 full wraps. Just going to make sure that that sits down nice and smooth, and I'm also going to tighten up that coil by diagonally opposing the pins on my pliers just to squish that down into position. So just make sure that that coil is nice and neat and that the end section is flush against the core. We're then going to just centralise that on the space you have available, and we're going to warm through the first couple of inches of that 20 gauge wire. Now I have around about 6 inches, but if you're nervous you can work directly from the reel. The reason I say if you're nervous, it's because if you think you might run out of wire, you might actually prefer to have more than 2 wraps, but I'm going to demonstrate for you with just a few simple wraps how effective the herringbone weave can be, especially in lovely earrings. So if you prefer to work from the reel, don't bother cutting it away. I've cut it away because it's easier to demonstrate with. So let's just hold that bead into position, draw the wire from the top of the core around the edge of the bead in a nice smooth arcing shape. We're going to pinch that into position whilst we draw the tail around the core and back over the top in the same direction as it was travelling. So the wire's gone over the top all the way around and continued in the same direction. So you can just pinch that very lightly with your pliers to set it in position, warm through the next inch or so of wire and draw it from the top of the core, around the edge of the bead, to the top of the core, but on the far side of our start point. So pinch that in position. I'm going to hold it like so. Draw the tail all the way round that core wire and over the top in the same direction as it was travelling. If you need to, you can just push that down into position. I'm going to repeat that same design 2 more times. When you have any subsequent weaves adding to your herringbone, what we're going to do is show you the side, hold that in position, and we're going to draw the second pass of wire underneath the first pass of wire, but then return the tail over the top of that core. Draw it all the way around and onwards as a continuation of the direction it was travelling. So we're only doing 2 wraps on either side today, so we've just got 1 more to go for. So get a little bit of warmth into that wire. If you look at it from the side, we're drawing the tail around the edge of the bead but underneath the first wrap we did. You can pinch that and then make sure that the tail goes over the top of that core wire. Draw that all the way around, and I'm going to finish with a second wrap on the core. Give that a nice little tighten, and then if I flip over to the rear of the design, we can trim away that last 1.5 inches or so of excess wire. So we've wasted just a tiny bit of wire, which you will find uses for in your jewellery making adventures. So what I'm going to do is just give that a hearty push. So I'm pushing in this direction. I'm not bending or deviating that core wire. All the pressure is going down the core towards the bead. Working with a lovely sturdy bead like this is an absolute joy when creating a herringbone. So very, very quickly we've created quite an interesting feature, and this will make a lovely earring all by itself. So if you grip the plain end of your core wire and just draw that weave down, it will sit and nestle against the double spiral you made at the base, and we're going to now make a loop up at the top. If you prefer, you can of course go for a wrapped loop. You have enough wire available here. I'm going to go for a simple loop on this piece by turning the wire over to the side, grabbing those memory wire finishing pliers to create a loop, just crossing that over at the top, taking a look, seeing if I'm happy with the shape and size before double checking the location of my cutters, and then giving that a little bit of a snip, and you can bring that down into position. So by itself, that's a really pretty earring, very light and achievable to wear. What we're going to do is give that a bit of a squish to make sure that we're happy with those wraps. You can gently pull apart the wraps so that the piece of wire closest to the core lifts slightly, but the side pieces stay underneath. You can lift again on the other side very, very softly, and you'll see slightly more of that herringbone wrap in wear. So you could just add that directly to your earring finding and you have an earring ready to go. However, I'm just going to show you how to make jointed jewellery today. So very, very beautiful to wear in the ear, especially if you've got hair up. But if you don't like the extra weight, then you can just stick with the one part. So I'm now going to make essentially a rosary link. This piece of wire is a piece of 18 gauge. It's about 3.5 inches in length again. And what I'm going to do around 1 inch from one end is turn a right angle bend, grab those memory wire pliers again. You could use your round nose or your bail making pliers. Just create a small loop on the end, and this is what you would do if you wanted a wrapped loop up at the top of that simple herringbone wrap earring. Take that tail around. Now if it is cold where you are, or your wire is a little bit firmer than this, you can grip that loop, being careful not to squish down on anywhere that the wires cross over. Let's bring that tail all the way around and just bring that last little bit home to squish it in position. Now if you have a sticky uppy bit of wire just on the end there, you can rotate your pliers in the direction of the wire itself, so the wire's travelling underneath. So I'm just going to rotate those pliers around, little bit of pressure but not so much that we squish, and that just rounds off the end slightly. Just make sure that the cut end sits flush down against that central core wire. Now we're going to add on those 3 links, 3 beads. These are so clever. And And all you would need to do is make sure that you're using the correct side when you load them on, because if you load them on upside down, it's going to look like that, which is interesting in and of itself, but it will move around in wear. So what I'm looking to do is to have them tessellate beautifully like so. I'm then just going to push that all the way down so that it sits against the loop. When you get to the other end, it's just a case of leaving a tiny little bit of space for your wrapping to fit. Push that over to one side. Head back in with your chosen round nose pliers. I'm using my memory wire finishing pliers, one of my favourite new tools of the last year. Absolutely love them. And again, I will finish by wrapping this around. So this is essentially a little rosary link. So I'm just going to push that down into position. And the beads are a little bit mobile until you completely use up all of that available space. So look twice that you're cutting the right wire. Get the tail of wire out of the way into your scrap or melt pot. And then we're going to make sure that that cut end sits down flush against the core wire. Now do be careful that you're not putting any pressure on the beads, just put a little bit of pressure on the wire itself, and then you'll be able to add these two pieces together. So what I would say is you may need to make your loop up at the top of your herringbone weave section move through 90 degrees, and I'll show you the reason why. When you're making jewellery with a beautiful heavy wire like 16 gauge, especially if it's copper, you have one opportunity to change the orientation by about 90 degrees. If you continue to twist, you will weaken that wire to the point where you will actually snap it, or it will snap in wear. So what I'm going to do is grip my design, and I'm going to turn that upper loop through 90 degrees. The herringbone weave is free to move at this stage. It doesn't matter if it moves a little bit. Now that has moved through 90 degrees, I can add it to the bottom of my rosary linked serpent bead. And what I'm going to do is make sure that I match the earrings to the first pair that I made. So let me show you what I mean. When you create a set of serpentine bead link sections like this, you've got one where the central section is up and one where the central section is down. So I would like these to match. You might prefer to have them in opposition. You might prefer to have them in a different way, but it's entirely up to you. So I'm going to add that loop in. Close that wire back up as that loop. And then all that remains to do is to add in our earring finding at the top. So I've made wrapped loops here, which means that my earring finding can open for me. Close that all the way up and then close your earring wire. And there you have your simple herringbone weave earrings. With just a few simple wraps, you've made very effective jewellery. Thanks so much for watching us here at Jessie James Beads. Have a beautiful day.